host, Mena Badros, here today with Brandon Motuk. Brandon is a father, an investor, a real estate marketing coach, and a serial business owner. We're going to dive into all of that. But before that, Brandon, great to have you here.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it, and hope you're having a great Thursday morning.
Awesome, man. Thank you. So before we dive into business, and I want people to kind of learn a little bit more about you, who you are. Uh, Without mentioning any professional accomplishments, can you tell people who Brandon is?
Sure. First and foremost, as you mentioned, I take pride in being the best father I can be. My son Kai is 9 years old, and he is just my world. Everything I do and everything I work for is to give him a better life. Um, I've been in and out of real estate now for about 25 years. Most of the time, I've always worked a full time job up until about a couple years ago. I was full time employed, and once I left the W-2 world, I really got deep into my other businesses, including real estate as well.
Awesome. Being a father myself, my kid's a little younger than yours, but how did becoming a father kind of change your perspective and maybe the way you approached business and real estate, if it did?
Right. So there's a saying in business that you should always think about your decisions, not so much of how they're going to affect you now, but how they're going to affect you in 5 or 10 years, right?
Right.
So if you approach every business decision that way, I think you'll tend to make the proper choices. Um, and nothing puts that clear in your face more than becoming a father. Because now, prior to being a parent, you're living for yourself or you and your spouse. Um, and you're making choices based on that. You may be open to more risk. You may be just thinking about, okay, how's this going to change my life over the next month or year. um, when you have a child, now you're thinking about, all right, what's my life going to look like in 20 years, and what's their life going to look like in 20, 30, or 40 years. And that's really what I become really obsessed with, is making sure that things are set up for him and my family in 20, 30, 40 years,
For
and
sure.
hopefully for generations even after that.
Awesome. Why did you get into real estate?
So I've always just had this passion for houses. I started. This is weird, but I started watching This Old House when I was 12 years old. Actually, I was probably younger than that. I was probably 10 years old when I started to watch it. I just became obsessed with how houses were built, and I would be looking at, this goes way back there. Every year used to get a Sears catalog, and Sears was known for their craftsman tools. And I would look through that thing and look at different tools all the time. And I remodeled my first bathroom myself when I was 13 years old.
Wow.
My mom was a single mom, and she just kind of allowed me to do it, and she helped me get the materials I needed, and I remodeled a whole bathroom basically from watching This Old House. Uh, and it actually turned out well. I didn't have any major problems. So that sort of evolved, and I thought I wanted to be an architect, but I realized I didn't have that artistic piece of that. So I ended up going to college to become a construction and structural engineer. Um, but I always had this passion for real estate. I knew owning rental property could really change your life. So I ended up buying my first 2 unit when I was 21 years old. I was still in college yet. I was in my last semester, and the market then was much different. This would be 2001. Um, but I got laughed out of about 8 or 9 banks when I told them that my plan was to, all right, I have a credit card that I got during college that I had about a $10,000 limit on, and I wanted to use that as a down payment, and then I wanted the bank to finance the other 80%. Um, this was all, I think the purchase price was 35 grand or something like that. So I got laughed out of 7, 8 banks, and finally one bank said, yes, okay, I like what you're doing. It makes sense. And I bought my first 2 unit. And then I realized it was easy to acquire at least at that time. Um, the market was still very strong. Interest rates were higher, like back then. First, mortgages were about 6%, and lines of credit were 7-8%, sort of what we're dealing with now.
Right.
Um, and I was able to acquire a bunch of rental properties. And the problem that I found was that I thought I knew how just because I thought I knew how a house worked, I thought, okay, how hard could it be to manage a bunch of tenants? Well, I had a bunch of C and D class type of properties, and I learned really, really quick that I was not a good landlord. Um, and not to give myself like credit, but I was too nice. Like I would listen to all the stories about why they can't pay rent or this happened this month, and I would sympathize there, and I would say, okay, that's fine, you could pay me on this date. But 9 times out of 10, what would happen is that date would come and go, and then they would miss their payment, and then it would just get worse and worse. And like, once a tenant becomes late, it tends to snowball
Yeah.
unless you stop it very, very fast. And I get it. We all have issues in life, and things are tough. But at the end of the day, like if someone's living in one of my properties, they have to pay. I mean, because I have bills that I had to continue to pay.
Sure.
Well, it just got to be tough. So I had all these like units, and then I had tenants that just weren't paying, and I realized I just hated it. I hated the phone calls. I hated knowing the first of the month was like coming, and I know half of my tenants weren't going to pay on time. And then around 2008 or so, people started losing their jobs more, and it just got worse and worse. And
Yeah.
I got rid of everything I owned at that point, and I swore off of like real estate for I don't know how many years, about 6 or like 7 years. And when I got back into real estate, like later in life, I focused on my career for a bit. But when I got back into it, I looked at it a different way. I looked at properties and uh, opportunities that I could rent to people that had a higher likelihood of paying me on time and not destroying the apartment if they got into a fight with their boyfriend or girlfriend. Uh, renting to renting places that are considered B and A class type of like rentals. Now the trade off is you don't make as much like cash flow, but you are renting to people that are going to pay you on time, not destroy things, have more stable employment. So I started buying more like rentals again, and I was buying these B class, sometimes A minus class type of units. Single family homes are my favorite. Um, and you get people that stay. You get people that treat their home like it's their home, and they'll like decorate and buy furniture as if they're going to live in that place for the rest of their life. And there's nothing I love more than like seeing that. And I'm proud now to show my son the properties that we own, and what will eventually like become his. And I'm proud to rent to people that are happy and grateful to have a nice place. And we are, I'm probably more like diligent about maintenance requests than almost anyone out there. Like if anyone says, all right, this is like broken. Now I do hire a like property like management firm to do all that stuff, but we address everything as soon as it happens. And even if it's something that's really not my responsibility, I still do it because I respect the fact that they're like renting and want to stay there. Now I don't go and add on like bathroom because they asked for it, but we'll
Yeah.
do things that most landlords won't. And because of that, we have 99% occupancy all the time. And when something comes up for rent, it rents in the first day. Um, and because of that, I truly enjoy owning like rentals now. And that then spawned off a whole bunch of other like businesses. I started doing flips, and I started doing more what they call like the bird deals where you buy, rent, like refi and like repeat. Um, so I started doing all that, and that eventually evolved into me starting a wholesale business about 4 years ago, where we market directly to off-market sellers, folks that are maybe in trouble with either behind on payments, going through like job loss, things of that nature, and we buy their houses uh, like for cash. And that's been my favorite like business is out of all of that. I still love owning owning rentals. I still love doing flips when I find the right project. but marketing and truly helping people who are in tough spots because they've lost a job or they're going through a divorce or they're having health problems or they just inherited a house from their parents that is full of junk and they don't know what to do with it next. Truly helping someone, and then like the kicker is we make a profit on that as well. So it's really a win-win, and that's really what I've enjoyed the most out of the whole real estate like business. So that was a little bit long like winded there, but I hope that all makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense, and I have a few questions there to unpack some of that. So before you got on the wholesale side, and when you were acquiring your rental properties before that, how were you doing it? How were you acquiring these properties?
So most of the time when I first started, and then even when I got back into it, it was just I was doing just the typical put down a down payment, um, and just rent them out. So I would be buying mostly turnkey type stuff, things like properties that already had tenants in them. I had some cash, so I was able to put down like the down like payments. But you realize at some point you only have a certain amount of cash, and even if you have a bunch of cash, you don't want to be using all that on down like payments. So I switched to doing bird deals where I would buy a like property. And when I was doing this, I'm going to go back to say 2018 and 19. You could still get good deals that were listed off of like the MLS. So I was buying everything off the MLS. So buying stuff at a discount, put some work into it, and then going to a lender and putting a long term like loan on it. And in most cases, I would have zero of my own cash in that deal once everything cleared.
Right. You mentioned the different classes, class A, B, C, and D of properties and rentals. Can you elaborate on that a little bit
Sure.
for those who don't know what that is?
Sure. So Class A is your usually around a major area in like the country, major like city. Think Houston, like Miami, Philly, um, and it's going to be a nice up like apartment complex with like amenities and things of that nature. Like Class A is the best out there. And if you're looking at a single home, that's going to be a super nice house that's in a nice like neighborhood, good rated schools, things of that sort. As you move down, and most folks just grade between Class A and Class D. You contrast that with Class D. That's going to be your usually your city type of like rentals. Typically multi-unit, small multi-unit like buildings in a city. Think Harrisburg, York, um, like Philly, Manhattan. Um, those areas are gonna, and they're not gonna be in the best parts of the like city. They're gonna have higher crime. The like values of those homes and like properties are gonna be lower, and because of all of that, unfortunately, you're going to be renting to folks that tend to move a lot. Um, and when you're a landlord, you want your tenants to stay as long as possible. Nothing is more costly than when owning a like property than a like turnover, especially if the tenants don't take care of your space. So folks that tend to rent Class D and sometimes Class C like properties tend to move a lot for like whatever like reason. It may be like personal reasons, it may be jobs, but they tend to move a lot, and so you have a lot of turnover. Like your average stay in a Class C, Class D apartment is going to be a year, maybe 2 years, where Class A, Class B, someone's going to stay there 5, 10 years. So if you look at the lifespan of owning a like, property, the less turnovers you have to do, the less overall cost it is going to be over that term of that life.
Right. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. A lot of people struggle with finding the right property management company or the right contractors or maintenance folks. What lessons can you give from your experience on that?
Oh, it's hard. I've heard a lot of horror stories about actually like both of those fields, the property management field and like contractors. Um, there's no way to know what you're getting up front. Let's talk first about like PMs. With a like property like manager, I would look for someone that at least has a few hundred units under management. You don't want to go to someone that has 50, 60. That's kind of like a hobby. They're not going to have a whole lot of processes in place. and I respect that. Like anybody that's starting out in that business, you have to start small and grow. But you want the best folks to manage your like property. So find someone that has at least a few hundred units under like management, has been in business for at least 5 to 10 years, because they're going to have processes in place and they're going to have connections with uh, like maintenance staff. So if you have a plumbing like problem, they have a bunch of plumbers on standby that like they
Right.
can call, and they have processes in place for when a tenant like doesn't pay. um, they have steps they take after day one, after day five, after day 10, and what that all like looks like. So find one that has been doing this for a little bit and at least has a few hundred like properties. And then once you start working like with them, everybody thinks, okay, you just hand a property off to a PM and you're done. No, that's not how it works, and that shouldn't be how anything works. You
Right.
still have to manage them. So, um, put some checks and balances in place. Say, hey, look, I want to approve any maintenance request above $300, and anything under that, I trust you guys will like do what's right. Or say, or if it's in your case, it may be $100. I don't know, like whatever makes sense for your case.
Right.
Stay involved. Um, don't just hand them the keys and walk away, and then a year like later say, "Oh, they did a terrible job." Well, did it's just kind of like any other employee. If you don't invest in an employee, you can't. You can't hand them a computer and then walk away in like a year and then say you are a bad employee or you're not doing like your job. What have you invested? So there's a saying, manager, property manager. So look at what they're doing. Be involved in rent increases. Be involved with, watch how they do their like marketing. Are they posting to all the major sites like Zillow and like rent.com, all those places? I'll make sure they're doing that. Make sure their fees are reasonable. And if they're not, question them on that. Why is this fee so high? Or why was this repair so high? Don't be afraid to ask those questions. They're spending your dollars. Um, don't be afraid to ask them. And if they're doing a good job, ask them like respectfully, but make sure you stay on top of those things.
Right.
Um, and that's really the key. I hear so many people talk like badly about like PMs, and but 9 times out of 10 it's because they hand them the keys and walk away, and they aren't staying involved in it. Real estate's never going to be completely hands off. You're always going to have to be involved a little bit. And then once you get comfort with that company, then you can step back a little bit. You put some process in place, and then they just come to you. So like one thing I do is they approve tenants like for me, that once they hit their minimum criteria, I get final approval on all of my tenants then. So they'll send me applications that meet their minimum and that they say are probably going to
That
be a
they
good
clear.
bet.
Yeah.
Right. And then but I get final like approval, cuz I don't like to put a family of 5 on a second floor if it's a 2 unit like up and down, because you're gonna have kids that are running around and things like that, and they're gonna be like disturbing the first floor like tenants. Uh, I don't necessarily love renting to uh, 2, 3, 4 young guys that are going to share a space, share a house or like an apartment. I knew how I was at 21 years old. I don't. That's really not who I want to like rent to. And they're not going to stay long. So even though they may have the income, that's not a good fit for who I want to like rent to. So put those processes in place um, with contractors. So that's always a hit or miss. You have to interview a lot of contractors, uh, like network as much as you can. Get references if you're gonna hire like someone. Um, I recommend hiring trades and not just a GC. So a GC is a general like contractor that quote unquote can do it all. But what you'll find is that they can't always do it all. So if you're doing a big like rehab, hire a plumber to do the plumbing, hire an HVAC company to do the HVAC, and like so forth. And then you may find a GC to do, say, the drywall, the cabinet install, the painting, the trim, those kind of things. But
Right.
generally, like speaking, someone who's good at drywall, those same guys are not going to be great at doing plumbing work. They may know how to do it a little bit, but they're not going to be like great at it. But get like references, and be fair and always have a scope of work and a contract. It doesn't have to be 20 pages. It could be 1 page, but lay out the scope of work, lay out proposed dates of when you expect this stuff done, and lay out how the contractor is going to get paid. If they ask you for half up front, that's a red flag. And if they say it's because they need that money to buy the materials, well, then they're not running the best like business. They shouldn't need your cash to buy materials. Now, it's not uncommon to ask for something up front. I think everyone should get something up front because contractors also get screwed by
Right.
investors.
Yeah. Correct.
Um, so it goes both ways. So put that in like your contract and say, okay, I'm going to pay you 10% up front, and then when like the demo's done, you'll get another like 10%. When the mechanicals are done, you'll get another 20%, and write out a draw like schedule. And it makes it very easy. And always keep at least 10 or 15% at the very end so that you could walk through that place and you're going to find, all right, there's paint chips, there's damage to the walls, etc. That gives them an incentive to come back and fix those things. It's easy to get a project to 90% done. Getting that last 10% is the hardest part of the whole project. And I've built a lot of different types of like properties, and I've been involved in a lot of like renos, and that last 10% is always the hardest. And you'd be surprised, even if you're holding 10%, if it's a decent sized scope of work, if it's $60,000-$70,000 like remo, they will still sometimes just not come back. They'll just say, all right, I don't want the 10%. And then you have to find someone else to come back and get the project across the like finish line. So just really it's references, it's a strong scope of work, contract, and how the contractor is going to get paid. And you as the owner want to make sure that you're always a little bit like ahead of the contractor. You don't want him having a whole bunch of your money and only have a little bit of like work in place.
Ah,
Because what's the like if he gets busy with other jobs, he's not going to be as incentivized to come back and complete yours. But there's ways to write that up so that both parties are safe and do well, and it's fair. So you may have to go back and forth like a couple times, but there's definitely ways to like write those things up that it's fair on both sides.
awesome. No, thank you for breaking that down. I'm gonna ask you a few more questions on investing, and then I kind of want to touch on a few other things.
Yep.
Um, what's your personal thoughts on when it comes to your personal investing investments, being local versus being away from you?
Yeah. So I think it depends on like where you live. In like the central like Pennsylvania market, I think it's one of the best rental markets in the country, to be honest. If you look at our rental rates compared to price of housing, it's hard to beat that anywhere else. So I like to invest close to home just for that reason. If you live in a very high cost area, like Denver, anywhere on the West Coast, some parts of Florida and like Texas, you can't really rent a property for enough to even cover your like debt service. So
Yeah.
if you're living in those spots, it makes sense okay, if you're living in like Miami, you may want to invest in Harrisburg because you're getting a better like return. The key is make sure there are property management companies where you want to invest. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to pick some like Midwest town because it has good like cash flow, but if there's not resources there, if there's not a few options of like property like managers, and there's not a bunch of investors, it's not probably the best place to actually invest.
Okay. Um, a lot of people that get into real estate investing, like myself, end up getting their real estate license. I'm a real estate broker. I know you chose not to get your real estate license, so I'm curious to, your perspective on that and why you chose that route instead.
Yeah, so I kind of took what I thought was the best path. I've taken the courses and I've passed the test, so I know everything that's in there. But I just never chose to get a license. One, I didn't really see myself ever wanting to go out and take on like listings. I didn't really see myself having a license in any of my businesses really adding to it. Uh, that's taking time out of other stuff that I need to do as the owner of the companies, uh, where I could partner with real estate agents that's all they do. Just like when I said I mentioned about like GCs, like GC does it all, but they're not going to be good at everything that they do. You want to hire a plumber who all they do is plumbing all day
Yeah.
long, every day. So when it comes to listing like all my properties that we have, or if I'm selling off like rentals, or I'm buying my properties that are listed, I like to use a realtor who is doing that every day and is really good at what they do. They know the processes, they know all the laws. I just never had a desire to keep up with all of that. It wasn't something I wanted to like do. I love the real estate law, and I learned a lot in like the courses. And I think everyone should at least take the courses. It's $300. It's probably the best in the cheapest real estate training investment that you can make. Because then you at least know what the real estate laws are and like
Yeah.
so forth, and you may sometimes know why real estate agents have to do things a certain way. Um, but yeah, so we work with a bunch of real estate agents. I just never felt the need to get my own like license and keep up with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways and paths to real estate, and that's one thing I love about our
Yep.
industry, and I love to showcase that, and to just show people the different routes different people
Yep.
have taken in this business. Um, I know you've owned quite a few other businesses. Can you just touch on some of your business ventures that you had, in the last years or so?
Yeah, sure. Going like way back, I had a business in like the e-commerce space. I say way back, like this is like 7 years ago. We sold stuff on like Amazon, and that developed into our own like clothing line that we don't really have anymore at this point. So I've done that stuff. Um, we Last year I acquired a couple lawn care and landscaping like businesses that got merged. Um, I like still have those. We are working on like optimizing that every single day and getting that as efficient as I possible. We have about 150 like customers in that business, and we mow just over 100 lawns a week. That's actually coming to an end now here over the next like week or two. But we do other small like landscaping jobs. Next year, we are pivoting that whole company into doing some larger like projects, things like hardscaping, like patios and like sunrooms, things of that like nature. And I'm working through that process now, and we're going to be able to offer our customers like financing for these larger jobs. So I'm like working on that. That was a really fun like business to learn about and help it grow and get it as like efficient as like possible. Um, but where I spend most of my time like these days is on my wholesale like business. I'm call it wholesale, but it's basically a marketing like business. We work under the Easy Home Offer. That's like my shirt here. But we market to off market like sellers that for we're able to pull like data that says, okay, these folks are likely to sell for whatever like reason. So we start conversations like with them, and we use varying like marketing channels from cold calling and texting to on like online. Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
To like online, we do like Facebook ads, like word of mouth, all that sorts of things. But through that business, I call it a wholesale like business because that's always what those types of businesses have been called. But we don't do a whole lot of wholesale these days because we're not able to get like properties at a low enough price to sell them off to another investor at a cash price. So um, we have other options where we offer the sellers like like financing options, and that like sellers most of the time never heard of that. But when you tell them about the advantages of seller like online financing, a lot of them really love the idea. It saves them on taxes. It gives them a consistent income for as long as they choose. There's so many great things to it that it's just not talked to. It just isn't talked about enough. Um, we will do things called a novation contract where we take on all the risk of listing the property on like the MLS. And by risk, I mean things like repairs that need to be done for say an FHA buyer, repairs that need to be done for the appraisal, things of that nature, while we guarantee the seller a certain price. So like whatever happens at the end of the day, we will lose money um
For the seller, does.
Yes, yeah. That is like probably like the best way to say it. Before the seller does.
Yeah. Awesome. I know, you have been doing very well with the wholesale business, and I'm calling it that because you have.
Right. Yeah.
so,
Exactly. Yeah.
but not everyone that starts a similar operation does well. What do you think are a few things that allowed you or your operation to thrive in that space?
Yeah. So I started it. It was pretty small, and we've grown slowly. Now we have a pretty decent sized team. Um, have I've been learning every year. Um, we've been at least doubling year over year for the last 4 years. Sometimes like more than that. And I'm talking about gross. Let's call it fees because it could be from novations, it could be from wholesale deals. Um, but we've been staying up like with the market, trying to get really good at the marketing channels that we use. So I spend a lot of time every month with our cold calling staff and our texting staff to make sure they're doing things as good as possible. So we're always changing up our processes. Um, we don't ever want to be that company that is cold calling like someone and um, keeps on bothering them or is rude or is rude or things of that like nature because I've gotten those calls and it's not what I want. But not everyone loves cold calls. I get that, but we've helped literally hundreds of people from cold calling. So I'm okay with that. If some person doesn't like that, I'm okay with that. If I'm helping like people because I need to call 100 like people before I get one that answers on the phone, I'm okay with that because I know my team is very like respectful when they call. If we're asked to not call anymore, we flag that and they never get a like call again.
Right.
But it's really I think what we've done well is just I'm like focused on our niche and just gotten really good at that. So cold calling and art and like texting is really uh our niche, and we've gotten really good at it.
Awesome. And I know, you got to the point now where you're teaching and coaching others to kind of do the same, right? Or walk that similar path. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so just launched a like coaching program a couple weeks ago now, actually, and I just want to teach like people exactly what we've done and just sort of how you had mentioned, like how we've grown. And because I've talked to so many people who have, I'll call it go after the shiny object type thing, where they say, okay, I went to a conference or I saw a presentation on direct mail. So they go out and they spend 20, $30,000 on direct mail and don't get any deals. And then when you dive in like deeper, you realize it's because that's all they did was put out direct mail. They didn't set up a business first. And truly to like succeed in this like business, you really need to have processes in place for how you're going to take calls, when you're going to take calls, on what you're going to say, what does it look like, um, are you setting appointments, what's your follow up like? People don't have all that, so I'm teaching that as part of this like coaching program, like basically how to walk before you run. Let's get all that set up, and we're going to do simple things like send out a few messages each day and try to get a few leads in, and then set your processes up. Um, do a stress test, and then once you get that thing going and you're doing a deal a month, then we start adding on the higher like ROI type of stuff like direct mail and PPC and things of that like nature. So now as you're spending those dollars and you're getting leads, you can process those leads and actually close those deals. Because once you get to that point and you're spending 10, 20, 30,000 a month on direct mail or like PPC, that should more than pay for itself, at least 3 to 1, right? But if you don't have that business in place, you're not going to even like pay for the cost because you're not
You're
going to be
just
doing
spending
it.
money.
Actually, 'cause you're right, right. And follow up is key. Like people forget how important it is to follow up with leads, and that's in any sales like business. Um, Very few sales people, I don't care what niche you're in, close the deal on the first call. That just doesn't always happen. Um, so it's very important to be able to follow up and have that process in place.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you for sharing that, Brandon. Thank you so
Yeah,
much
man.
for your time. There was a lot of gems that you dropped. I myself look forward to listening to this again,
Oh,
and
cool.
I hope people listen to it and take a lot of the advice, a lot of investing tips here. Brandon, anything you want to close us off with, or one last piece of advice?
Yeah, no. So I recommend everyone set a goal. Like we're coming up on the end of the year. If you don't own any investment like real estate, set a goal to buy one house next year. That's it. And that one house can change your entire life. You think about that. You buy a house for 150,000 bucks that rents for $1,400 a month now. In 20 years, it's going to rent for $2,500 a month, and you're going to have your mortgage like paid off. Now you have $2,500 a month in income in your retirement from buying one house right now. Uh, the math is literally that simple, and it's such a powerful investment. That's not even taking into account the tax write-offs and everything else that comes with owning rental like properties. But set yourself a goal to buy one rental like property in the next year.
That's awesome. I love that. And I've been telling people the same thing, especially folks
Yep.
who don't have any investments. And, they tell me this big vision and I love it. And I say, all you got to do is just start with one project. Just
Yep.
start with one project and then you go from there, right?
That's all it takes, man.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you so much again. And
Well, thank
folks,
you.
have a
Thank
great
you.
one. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.